Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Medieval Dynasty and we're going to be bringing you some settlement building tips. Now some of these are going to be logistical things, some of them are going to be super important, and some of them are just going to be little aesthetic tips for how to help make your settlement look better. So it's just going to be a lot of different stuff about building your settlement. So since I've gotten a decent amount of requests for different things in that nature, I figured I'd kind of pop it all into one video. So, I've said in previous videos before that it's super important to pick a good location for your settlement. And so, of course, I'm going to start off with that. It doesn't pay to skip on to anything else if you don't follow that important step. And now there's countless great spots on this relatively large map to build a settlement. Almost anywhere. You can build a good one almost anywhere. But there's a lot of factors that go into what's a good spot. And so kind of what I like to tell people to focus on, because people are like, well, I mean, what's a good spot? You can't be spoon-fed it. There's no one thing that makes something a good spot. But just calculate how much you're going to need. You're going to want a big enough and flat enough area so that you can actually build a settlement. A lot of places have a lot of rocky outcrops in them or mountains or something that makes it almost impossible to build a settlement. And then you've got other places where, you know, the ground is just super uneven. Like once you get up here, this is too uneven to build. Like, I know this, you'd think, oh, well, people built villages on slopes all the time. No, this is basically an impossible spot to build a good village because most of this is going to be, it's going to tell you that the ground's too uneven to build. So you need a large enough and flat enough spot to actually build a settlement. And there are countless places across the map. I'm not going to show a bunch. I've already done a video, in fact, and I think you should check it out if you're interested in 5 really good spots to build a village. One of them is right here. But yeah, definitely as my first tip, pick a big enough spot. And also you're going to want to keep in mind resources. So obviously this is a really good location for wood. I'm close to the mountains, so I've got a good supply of iron and rock. So that's going to come into mind. I like being by a water source, so you can have fishing as an option and set up traps and have a fisherman, all that sort of stuff. But what it comes down to, the most important thing is going to be that you actually have enough room to build. Because resources, even if you got to go for them, you can still go for them. But you can't really change the land once you've started building. So that's tip number 1. My second tip is plan the layout before building. So when you've picked a spot, kind of try to picture what you want to go for. And mind you, I've entirely tore down settlements and rebuilt them. So trust me, it is possible. So if you pick a bad spot and you need to do it, you can do it. Just make sure that you keep your resource storage up at least long enough to get a new one built so you can transfer resources, and that way you can actually store resources. Because if you tear that down and like get rid of your resources or whatever, it's really hard to do. So that is something you can do. But definitely plan the layout before building. Kind of picture where you want things to go. I like to kind of figure I want my house to be in a pretty prominent location. I want it to look kind of cool. So that's kind of the first step. I want to know where my roads are going to be. Are they going to run through the town, or like this town, are they going to run along the outside of the town? Kind of try to focus on what buildings you're going to need to be going into the most often. So let's say you're cooking a lot in this playthrough or whatever, like you're trying to bake more things so you can only do that in the tavern. You're going to be going into the tavern a lot. Put that out kind of in a centralized location that you can get to nice and easily, and put your food storage right next to it. So that way when you're going in and out getting ingredients and storing stuff, you're not going very far. So if you get a little over encumbered, it's not that far of a trip. Same thing goes for your resource storage. If you're crafting a lot or sewing a lot, put those buildings kind of close to each other so you don't have to run across your whole town when you sew an inventory full of boots, or when you make an inventory full of hammers or something like that. It's definitely going to be important. Fields are one of those things that I see people like to try and put inside. If they have walls, they like to try to put them inside, or they want them right next to their buildings. I don't find it entirely necessary. Most crops are pretty light, with the exception of like cabbage. So if you have them outside your walls like this, I find that's adequate, especially if you fence them off, because then it looks nice. But yeah, planning the layout beforehand is going to be important, because if you just start placing down buildings, you're either going to have to tear them down and move them, or accept a layout that's less than optimal. And to be fair, this layout I have in here wasn't very well planned, so it's a good example of why it's important to do that. So that is tip number 2. Tip number 3 is just a basic rule. Always build your storage first. So the first thing you're going to be prompted to do in the game is build a house, which, you know, you need a place to live, so that makes sense. Then after that, you kind of have the freedom to build whatever you have unlocked. And so you may be tempted to, because maybe you don't want to cut down trees, you're going to build your lumber camp first. I can see why you'd go to that, but you need a place for things to go first. Your lumber camp doesn't do you any good unless you have someone to work it for you. I mean, it offers another storage chest, but it's not a particularly big one, so it's not all that useful. Until you have someone to actually be a lumberjack and then gather wood for you. So it doesn't pay to build that before your storage, because the person can't work there if the storage doesn't exist. And in addition to all of those basic reasons, the food storage and the resource storage buildings have basically unlimited size in their chests. And you're going to need that because all the rest of the chests have nothing, and your carry weight isn't very high. So the most important building to build early is going to be your food storage and your resource storage. As soon as you get those unlocked, get them up, because they make building a settlement so much easier. Tip number 4 is all about houses. And now, a lot of people, they'll go through and they'll only build whatever the best one they can is. I don't do that. I build for location, because houses are the easiest to place because they're the smallest footprint. I like to build them all the way leveled up right from the start. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer to gather the stone than just to build wattle walls and straw, but they retain heat better, your people are happier because of it, and that way you don't have to upgrade it later. Plus, they're way more durable, so you don't have to run around fixing them every 15 minutes. So definitely good to go with the fully upgraded, and then once you've got them up to the regular stone walls like that, use some daub, upgrade them even more, improves the heat retention even more, and makes them look awesome. So that's one thing about houses. But the other thing about them is only build them as you need them. So I know people, they'll be like, well, I want to have 3 houses in my place, you know, just in case I'm able to get 3 villagers. Don't do that. Wait until you've got a villager happy enough that they want, or a citizen somewhere, get them so they like you enough so they're willing to join you, and then build the house. Because otherwise you're just wasting space. It took me several years to get enough people to fill up, I think until I could get 5 people to join my village, just based on how I had wooed them. And I was wasting space with a house before that. Don't do that. It's not smart. Because they're just going to take up space that could be used for something more useful, like a hunting shack or a fishing hut or something. So only build them when you need them. The 5th tip is going to be kind of an aesthetic one, and it's going to be one that you can see in this village I did some, but not all the time. And it's going to be build your buildings far enough apart to account for fenced-in yards. And this, like I said, it's not super important. You don't need a fenced-in yard by your building, but it looks nice. So you can see this is the tavern here. I've got a fenced-in yard. Over here, you've got a house kind of out here where I could fit it, and then next to it, you've got a house with a yard. Which one of those looks better? I think this one. Same thing goes for your, like, little farm shacks. I like to build fences around them. Make it so, you know, like, this is your sheep area. Sheep shouldn't be outside of it, and nothing else needs to be inside of it. And I do that for all my farming stuff. So you can see back here, I've got one around all of my little farming things. Definitely save enough space to do that. There are certain settlements in the game that look all right, where they're all kind of right next to each other, but I think it looks much better, and it keeps the flow of your village feeling way more natural if you've got enough space to do, you know, your own little fenced-in areas. So that is, in a nutshell, that is tip number 5. So tip number 6 is going to be another aesthetic one here, and you may have noticed it already while I was talking about this, or in a previous video, but you can make your walls, once you get to a point where you're building walls around your settlement, you can make them look way cooler if you just get a little creative with them. So this tip is about layering your walls. So you may see it in other places in the game where people have got the palisades or the regular wood layered wall, and then they've got some rocks by it. I think it looks awesome, and it serves multiple purposes. So a good thing about that here is you can kind of stand up on it. And so let's say you got your spear, there's intruders, you'd be like, stand back, whatever, you know. It's kind of like having actual battlements instead of just a palisade. So that's one thing it does, but it also looks awesome. The theme I was going for, I did them on both sides. Most settlements, you'll just see them on the inside, which, like I said, is more useful because you can stand on it. But I was going for the sort of, I think it's 8th or 9th century, where you'd be coming into fortified places where they actually had wooden walls and everything. A lot of times they would have, the bottom half would be made out of an actual stone foundation that was built around the wooden part. It makes it way more durable, and it really sells that image of the fortified town that's been there for a while, but obviously it's from an area that has more timber than it has stone capabilities, or at least, you know, labor, or maybe they're not very rich. But it just looks way better than just having the palisade. So yeah, that's tip number 6. Layer your walls. It looks cool. Tip number 7 is something else you may have noticed, and that's if you just use different types of fences. This is another aesthetic one, by the way. Use different type of fences or walls, and it kind of makes them look like doors. There are no doors in the game. That bothers me. I really wish you had gates that you could actually close, make it feel more useful having the wall. I did a video where I was ranking weapons, and I got chased by a bison, ran in through one of my doors, and I was like, oh my god, I didn't think he was going to come in here. So I ran in a house, he chased me inside the house. I would really like gates on these walls that would keep animals out or keep my pigs in. But yeah, so one of the ways you can simulate that look is to use alternating types. So if you use the palisade wall and you layer it like this, pop one of these on there, looks like a door. Looks pretty awesome. And that same principle can be used for using the different fences. So the one I think looks particularly good is if you use the kind of stick fence around your pasture, which I think looks better for this type of thing. You pop on this type of fence, the one I have for house, like the yards, and it looks like a gate. So that's just a good way to simulate a gate. I think they're going to be adding other things because you see them in the villages where you've got like tables and chairs and other stuff like that that you can actually decorate your yards with. But for now, it's pretty limited. So I like to, fence things off, imitate gates, all that sort of stuff. Little aesthetic tweaks that are going to make it look so much nicer. Tip number 8. If your buildings are damaged, and now this one's ironic because while I'm recording this, I've got a whole bunch of buildings damaged that I'm noticing around. Like that wall there, that roof up there. But anyway, if your buildings are damaged, fix them immediately. It negatively impacts your productivity. It negatively impacts people's happiness. There's a whole lot of reasons you just don't want it doing it. If a building gets damaged enough, like I had this barn once where like 3 walls and one of the ceiling things was damaged, they stopped farming. I don't know if it's supposed to be that way or if it's just a glitch, but it's important. And the best way to go about that, because you can see that over there super damaged. You can go around town looking at every building, or you can pop into here, click on buildings, and it's going to highlight ones that are damaged. So my resource storage is damaged. My hen house is damaged. Those are the things that you're going to need to go fix. So yeah, that one's nice and simple, but I figured it was a good one to include. So tip number 9 is going to be your wood management. Now, I don't recommend just clear cutting everything and getting rid of the stumps all over the place, just because you're going to need wood consistently throughout the game. So, cut it back as far as you need it for something, but don't cut it back any further than necessary. But with that in mind, when you do want to get rid of it, like for a long time, it took me a while to figure out how to get rid of the stumps. So when you do want to get rid of it, it's really simple. So let's just say you're chopping down your tree. Because they will grow back. I think it takes 2 seasons for a tree to grow back. So now that I've cut this stump down, if I left it alone since it's summer, it would have grown back by winter, which is weird. But, for new growth, especially because these are oak trees. Some of them are oak at least, and that one's pine. But, and it would take forever for oak to grow back. But anyway, so the tip here is once you've cut it down, if you want to get rid of it, grab your shovel, walk right up to it, aim down, dig, stump gone. Not going to grow back. You get an extra log for it and everything. So yeah, dig up your stumps when you're done. I'm hoping at some point, I don't know if they have already and I just don't know how to do it, but I'm hoping at some point they're going to add the ability to level off ground. Like, I don't like this. I don't like having plants growing all over the place. I'd like to have roads going through the inside of my town. I want all that added. At the moment, to the best of my knowledge, it's not an option. If it is, let me know down in the comment section because that would be awesome if there's a way to get rid of all these plants. But for the moment, I don't think there is. But yeah, what you can do is get rid of stumps. So the 10th tip is going to be kind of similar to something we've already talked about. And so I said to build the storages. And one of the reasons I said it was so important is because their storage level is basically unlimited. And so my next tip is you don't need to just store resources in here or food in your food storage. You can store anything in there. It's not going to disappear. What will disappear is food that you store in there, or food will, now that they've added the ability for food to rot in chests, which I'm not a fan of because it seems to go really fast. But, I get it for realism. If you put a pickaxe or some extra arrows or anything like that inside of your storage chest in here, no one's going to run off with them. And considering how limited the storage chest in your house is, it kind of is a no-brainer. I know I say that, but again, it took me a while to start feeling comfortable because I was worried that it would get lost or someone else would use it, or I don't know. I don't know what I was worried about. But yeah, use your resource storage. So that way you can actually keep some spare tools and some extra weapons or some different types of clothing or extra seeds, whatever, You don't have to get rid of it. You can just store it in there. Especially considering what I've realized, things don't seem to despawn when you drop them on the ground. I think rotten food might, but everything else, like I'll be like, oh, I don't want these logs, I'll drop them, and they'll be there forever. And tip number 11 is going to be try to picture streets when you're building your settlement. I know we kind of got off of what it felt like for settlement building, but we're back on it now, even though all those tips were relevant. So this settlement isn't perfect because of the location. It's kind of one of the more complicated areas to build in. Not too bad, but you know, it's got its drawbacks. But you want to try to plan streets, and so the best way to start with that is to kind of plan where you want your openings to be. And now I built a gate here, a gate on the opposite wall, and 2 on the long wall on the basically the front of the town, I guess. But you're going to want to plan that first. And so between them, you should have what eventually, I assume eventually we'll be able to put down roads. And now this village, like I said, the layout isn't perfect here because ideally you should be able to go straight through, or even if it's not a straight shot, it shouldn't have the tavern with the yard out, because this here, not a road. It kind of throws off the immersion. And same thing goes for this. I have like a side street here that I was trying to go for, but then I've got all my farming stuff back here. And yeah, you can get through in each area, but it just feels congested. It feels like if this was a real town, you wouldn't have it this way. And I like, for immersion wise, like that's all this is about, is immersion, because it doesn't really affect gameplay. It's not like we have traders coming to your town or whatever. But for immersion, think about it. You own a medieval town, or you're in charge of a medieval town, you're setting it up. Do you want outsiders to have to walk into your backyard when they're walking through your town, up in your in by your animals and in the backs of your shops? Or do you want them to have to come down the main road and come in one end and go out the other? You know, so that's something that on my next settlement build I'm going to focus on real heavily. I'm going to try to grid my stuff where I want it, plan where I'm going to build everything, and make sure that I've got roads. So each of my gates, you can maybe even see the gate on the other side, or at least have a nice straight shot road that goes through. But yeah, that is all of the building tips I've got for you now. I like the aesthetic ones. I hope as more things get added, we'll be able to really start making things look unique. And this settlement here, I was going for sort of a Kattegat vibe from like Vikings, you know, so it's right on a lake. Obviously it'd be better if it was right on the ocean or something, but you know, open to the lake, has a little dock, walled around the outside, all that sort of stuff. That's kind of what I was going for. And I think it fits rather well because the time period's pretty close to being right. But yeah, that is all the tips I've got for you for building a settlement. I hope you like this guide, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you like this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.